live streaming service. Yes, the Mediterranean Sea is in our tropical weather discussion today, along with virtually everywhere else in the world right now, because the tropics have decided that they are not for dying anytime soon, certainly not in the northern hemisphere. This is a subtropical storm that has formed in the Mediterranean Sea in the last 12 hours. We are calling it a subtropical storm with 45 miles per hour winds and a pressure around 994 millibars. This storm is moving towards, well, initially it's going to probably stall for the next 24 hours or maybe 12 hours now, and then veer off to the northeast towards Greece, and then through eventually maybe towards Turkey as a remnant. Probably not going to last very long at all. Just one of the many features that we are looking at right now across the globe. Away from this, we have also got Typhoon Trami, which remains a Category 2 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. And it's still looking fairly decent. Massive as well. Its wind field extends out over 200 nautical miles in some directions, particularly in the northeastern quadrant. And still has winds of 160 kilometers per hour. Pressure around 957, and as you can see on those latest frames, it's pretty close now to Okinawa. There are plenty of other islands that are not marked on that particular map, which is certainly a point of frustration for me. We don't create these graphics, so these come from NOAA, the NOAA floaters. They decided they wouldn't mark out Miyakojima and the other islands in that area, but never mind. You can see it there, a gradual movement to the northwest, and it's expected to turn towards the north and then later northeast. We did a video on this storm just an hour ago, so you might want to watch that on our channel for the very latest on that. It's still pretty much up to date and probably has more information than I can afford right now with everything else that's going on. This is Hurricane Rosa. We did an update on this at 6 AM Pacific Daylight Time, and since then it looks like it's done a little bit more of a northward motion in those latest frames. First visibles appearing. It's starting to look a little flaky. You can see on the infrared views on the right hand side, really starting to have some trouble, and those cloud tops have really weakened in this one in the last few hours. Probably most of it due to its pretty slow movement, which will of course cause upwelling in those sea surface temperatures that were marginal to begin with. And we were talking about last night how this could be coming on to the verge of reaching Category 5 status. Well, it didn't in the end, and now it's weakening, could be on a drastic weakening trend. As we continue to watch from the coast of the Baja California Peninsula, it could still be tropical by the time it gets there, striking the northern part of the Baja California Peninsula. This is Tropical Depression 30W. I believe it has sparked a tropical storm watch in Guam. It would certainly be prudent of them to do so. This is more than likely going to become our next typhoon in the Western Pacific, and the model's suggesting that it's going to pretty much take a very similar track, well, not a completely similar track to Trami, but it's going to end up in the same place, essentially. It's going to cross the Western Pacific Ocean, the Philippine Sea, towards the Japanese islands, could strike there as a significant typhoon again, for an area of the world that has really not had a respite this year. I think it is the third busiest season for the current date, End of September, 30 storms. Third busiest. Behind 1965, I think it was. And I think 1994 as well was the other one. Regardless, they were two very busy seasons. And we'll see what's going to go on with that afterwards. Here's a look at the Atlantic Ocean right now. Tropical Storm Kirk. Not much left of it in those latest frames. You can see the visible there on GOES 16. There's so many different things we could be looking at today. We can't get the best imagery on all of them, I'm afraid. Not whilst I'm here anyway, on my own. But you can see Kirk moving through there. Looks like its circulation's exposed. It's leaving behind its convection over the Lesser Antilles. Now towards the top part of your image is what's left of Leslie. It's starting to get a little bit more convection. Could be a subtropical storm very soon indeed. As a matter of fact, I've not even looked at the National Hurricane Center, but they haven't put it to a subtropical storm yet, but they think it will happen. I think they are calling it a when, actually, which is rather bullish of them, but they think it will happen later today or tonight. And Kirk down there, 45 miles an hour, 1007 millibars, and at the 4 p.m. Update my time, that is, 11 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time, all warnings have been discontinued, and with 45 mile an hour winds, a pressure of 1007, this storm is not going to be with us much longer. As I just reload this page, just to bring us up to date with those maps. Oh, this is the subtropical storm in the Mediterranean. That was the track map as of 3 p.m. UTC, and you can see what's expected of it over the next 2 days. As I said, not going to last particularly long. Striking Greece, southern Greece, possibly tomorrow afternoon or evening as a subtropical storm. Warnings are out there already. Not so much for the southeastern area, but mainly towards the west, the Ionian Islands in particular. And then by the 30th of September, moving in towards the northeast there, but weakening, we expect. There are wind warnings out there in Italy as well, but it doesn't look like the storm's going to get too close, although with it being subtropical, its wind field is probably larger. This is the latest forecast map for Kirk. As you can see, not much left in the tank for Kirk, according to the National Hurricane Center. Another victim of the Eastern Caribbean graveyard. It's really been to town on these storms this year. And you can see how it's likely to dissipate on Saturday. Here's the latest map for Rosa. This is remarkable. So now the National Hurricane Center think it will be a tropical storm just a few dozen miles from the US border. And they have cones of uncertainty for a reason. San Diego in with a chance, pretty low chance, of tropical storm force winds. In fact, the actual percentage chance they give, 11%. That's a 1 in 9 chance of San Diego receiving tropical storm conditions from Rosa next week. Fascinating. Nonetheless, regardless, the remnants of this storm will end up in Arizona by the looks of things, unless it goes west of the cone. And I don't think it will, I have to say, considering how it's already making the turn towards the north, and I think it's going to side maybe east of the cone, if anything, at least at the minute. But it's going to be very curious to see how that one plays out, and of course watches and warnings will probably be put out further north than we've seen in recent years. Oh, by the way, just another point on that. There is another system that's likely to become a hurricane in the eastern Pacific in the next week as well. That will probably remain out to sea, but we still don't know for sure. This is the JTWC map for Typhoon Trami, and they actually do predict strengthening again. As it enters the East China Sea, sea surface temperatures around Okinawa and the Amami Islands are very warm, around 29 degrees Celsius. So there is the potential for strengthening again as it moves past Kyushu and then goes and affects the area around Shikoku, just south of Osaka, towards Nagoya. This particular area has been affected by at least 2 different typhoons, maybe more than that. I'm losing count myself. It really is a hotspot this year. So that's the track from the JTWC. Here's the track from the JMA. Something very similar, actually, and curiously, perhaps, taking it, if you follow the center line of the cone, which is not a good idea, by the way, but models trending as well towards the storm, brushing southern Kyushu, not actually making a landfall there, and then ending up going further to the northeast. I forget the name of that province that juts out there on the coast, and then off towards the northeast, turning post-tropical in the normal fashion you would expect. On the left-hand side, we're not going to cover it very much, but what's left of Cyclone Liua, still a tropical depression by the looks of things, moving away now from the Solomon Islands. You remember Fiji, they said it would become a Category 2 on the Australian scale. Last night they put it back down to Category 1 on the forecast because they lost their nerve on that bullish forecast, and it proved to be the right decision. Here's some recent model runs for Rosa. Now, it's pretty unlikely that the storm will strike anywhere south of Baja California North. And plenty of the models having all kinds of wacky scenarios there, which will make people hark back to the storms of 1939 and 1858 that struck California as tropical cyclones. I must stress that is not likely at the minute, but there is an 11% chance of tropical storm conditions in San Diego. That's according to the National Hurricane Center at their last update. Here's the latest on Kirk. If you're wondering about its eventual track, models actually all over the place. With the system being as weak as it will be, probably not going to be talking about this one again, similarly as it was the case with Isaac. As far as I'm aware, there are no forecast models that re-intensify the storm afterwards. Let's bring it back again. This is the automated streaming page that we've had up all day from Force 13. It reloads automatically to display the latest information, so sometimes we get caught away. This is Leslie, and you can see there pretty much, I mean, it is a messy agreement, but it's sort of an agreement that the storm's going to stay out to sea, well to the east of Atlantic Canada. Just 2 outliers there, but when you consider the amount of other models, only about a 5 or 10% chance that that scenario would happen. In later life, Leslie may end up in Iceland or in Greenland, somewhere towards that general direction. This is the HWRF forecast for 30W. This was from earlier on. I think there'll be a new version out by now. But that showed a Category 4, another one with a large wind field as well. And this is a picture of the Atlantic right now. As stated, 90% chance on Leslie regenerating in the next 48 hours. That'll be quite a big egg on the face of the National Hurricane Center if that didn't happen. It really looks like it will. You could argue maybe it already has. But that's the current situation. Nothing else on the radar at this moment in time, thankfully, in the Atlantic. At least not in the 2-day period. In the 5-day period, there was one out there not long ago, but there is now nothing else out there. Here's the Eastern Pacific. Now, you remember the hurricane I was talking about earlier that is going to follow Rosa? Well, there it is, beginning. The 70% chance there in the next 48 hours. That system will become our next tropical storm and probably our next hurricane in the Eastern Pacific. It should remain further south and will probably move further away towards the west. 90% chance in the next 5 days. And there's another one. The Central Pacific, 70% chance on this one in the next 48 hours, 90% in the next 5 days. Model's doing a few curious things with this one. It's going to be our first Central Pacific named storm this year, and in fact, the first Central Pacific named storm in quite a while. I can't remember the last one that we had. It's been a while, over a year. But model's doing some curious things. Could affect some of the westernmost islands, the ones off the main Hawaiian island chain, towards the international dateline later on, so that's something else we're going to be watching closely over the next few days. Here's a look at the eastern hemisphere. Liua is still going in the South Pacific. If you've been under a rock recently, it was the first September South Pacific cyclone to form since at least 1950, and definitely since 1934 when one formed there. September is the rarest month of the year for a South Pacific cyclone. Yes, more rare than August and July, and October. You get more activity towards the end of that month when things start warming up. And of course you can see the other systems there, and 92S in the southern hemisphere. Models were keen on that for a while. I'm not sure what they've been saying recently because we've been looking at everything else, but curious that the JTWC only has it on a low chance. Here's the percentage chances of tropical storm conditions in the next 5 days. As you can see, chances now very minimal in Taiwan, although there are gale advisories still out in that area. 93% on Miyakojima. I mean, they're probably already occurring in a lot of these places. Pretty much a foregone conclusion with that graphic. And further north, southern Kyushu in particular. Northern Kyushu, maybe not so much. Shikoku, definitely. Hiroshima area, maybe, maybe not. And you can see the central part of Honshu there as well. Very high chances, 65% in Tokyo. And those were the chances from Kirk earlier on today. I don't think that's relevant anymore. The storm is now moving away, and those chances are near nil. So that's a summary of what we're looking at right now. So let's take us back to the latest on the Mediterranean system. It looks like this right now. This is the Mediterranean Sea. We've been watching it very closely over the last few days. We've called it a subtropical storm with winds of 45 miles an hour, a pressure of 994. This storm will threaten the southern part of Italy and parts of Greece over the next few days. And indeed, some of its peripherals are already sweeping through the continent, even into southern Albania, and indeed into western Turkey there as well. That's some visible imagery on the system. I'm going to do my best shifting between different forms of satellite imagery to get all of the storms in right now. So let's take a look and see if we can get the GOES 17 imagery in the eastern Pacific to show you Rosa. You'll have to bear with me a lot during this section because things are flying all over the place and there's a lot going on. If you have any questions or comments whilst we're spending half the time waiting, start your message with Force 13 all in text. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And you can see here Rosa, once the animation concludes, you're getting a bit of a better idea how it looks there now. Those latest frames, you can see the eye wall and the eye structure just beginning to decay. I mainly put it down to that stalling motion that it's had for quite a while, and those sea surface temperatures and the upwelling, and that is going to weaken the storm. Further towards the east, you can see that new area of interest. That is going to be our next storm in the eastern Pacific. Now let's go to the western Pacific and take a look at the Typhoon, which is over here somewhere, and in a minute it will appear for us, hopefully. I'd be glad of that if it did. Okay, well, it's not loading at this time. Isn't that swell? The storm, though, has a very wide eye at this time. It's about almost half the size of Taiwan. We did an update on it just over an hour ago. The threat is very high on some of these islands. A stage 7 on the CDPS, which is catastrophic, mainly owing to its slow movement, about 7 knots, and a very large wind field, and its strength 160 kilometers per hour. That's 100 miles per hour. Pressure around 957 millibars. And by the time I finish talking about it, the imagery finally shows up. And that's how it has been looking in those recent frames, and the eye is so large. It's still about 90 miles away from Miyakojima. That's the closest island to the eye, and it's almost in the eye already. Huge. Its bands just about staying off the coast of Taiwan on the very extreme left-hand side of that image. Okinawa about to get some serious effects from this, we expect, and all of those Ryukyu islands. Just curious about what the rain rate is suggesting. In fact, I might want to bring it away to the Japanese radar. That would be quite useful. We'll go and get that shortly. But for the time being, there's the latest track of the storm. There is a typhoon warning in effect for Okinawa and for the southern islands of the Ryukyu island chain, Miyakojima and Yayama. And I'm going to try and bring up some radar now of that storm, because I think that might be rather useful. Again, quite difficult to prepare for a show like this because a lot has been going on very recently. Let's see if we can show this now. Okay, maybe not very well. Or not at all. Let's try this imagery, just showing the web page in a way that I can you can sort of see it on the radar there, and just to get it to play that animation. Okay, that might take a while as well. Alright then, well there we go. You saw a little look on the radar before. That was from earlier, and there we go, it is playing through now. You can see some significant rainfall affecting the Ayama Islands there and Miyakojima as well. And this now, I think, is the nowcast from the JMA, what it expects of the storm over the next hour or two. There it is, moving off. A gradual northwestward movement. Interesting. Let's just go back to GOES 17 to see if we can take a look at what that Central Pacific storm looks like right now as well. As I say, jumping back and forth across everything at the minute. There's a lot to cover. The GOES 17 imagery should be appearing here somewhere. It's about 600 miles from Hawaii. And you just caught a glimpse of it then. On the move towards a general westerly direction. And looking pretty good, I have to say. I wondered whether it might have been a tropical depression last night. But there it is, lingering. Now let's take a look at some visible imagery further east, the area around Rosa, and we may be able to see a little bit better how the storm is looking in terms of visibly, but we saw on the infrared earlier it is starting to come apart a little bit. Certainly starting to wane with its cloud tops and its eye structure. Again, just whilst I try to get the latest imagery. But on the left-hand side, you can see Typhoon Trami and how it's been developing recently. A big blow-up of convection in those late frames. And here is the visible imagery now of Rosa. That's how it's been looking this morning. Yeah, starting to struggle a little bit, but general movement towards the north. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next few days, how quickly it weakens. Because the whole period that we're looking at, the next 4 or 5 days, will determine how strong it is by the time it ends up there in the northern Baja California Peninsula. It certainly got stronger than was predicted. The NHC went with high-end Category 3. Some of the models did have Category 4, HWRF notably. So there we are. Someone did ask the question about Trami and its convection, a sign of strengthening perhaps. Well, let's bring it back here. This is how the storm has been looking in those latest frames again, and as I was mentioning, a flare-up at the northern part of the storm at this time. The eye still looks very ragged. I would say that it is probably staying the same right about now. Maybe a very slight increase in wind, maybe to 105 miles per hour like it was last night, or earlier today as it was local time. But 100 miles an hour seems fair, 160 kilometers per hour, and its movement still very slow. It's only moved about 300 miles in about 4 days now. If you do have any other questions, please send them in. As we continue to look at the storm situation. And just to bring us on to that latest loop there of Rosa as well, as mentioned at the beginning of the show, 11% chance of tropical storm conditions in San Diego, California. Can you believe that? Well, you must, because that's what the National Hurricane Center is saying at their latest update. Alright then, now I suppose it might be a good idea to take a look at some models. It's usually what some of our members do whilst they're on the stream, but no one's here today, so we'll show you the Tropical Tidbits model output, showing you what the GFS at the minute is showing. As you can see, the Leslie, pretty deep system, pretty broad, quite massive actually when you look at the scale of the thing, certainly compared to Kirk, which is moving through. So let's just animate this. Leslie moving towards the southwest, gets quite far towards the southwest as well, on level with Florida just about in latitude. Not quite, almost. In the 970s, that could be a significant hurricane if it's tropical. Now that's the big question, will it be tropical? Just rocking back to watch what Kirk does, not much is the answer. It does end up in Jamaica as a very, very weak system, and you can see that new hurricane moving off as well in the eastern Pacific. As for Leslie, there it is moving through. What happens there? Is that related to Kirk? Something related to Kirk ends up going through Hispaniola. I don't think it is Kirk, and develops apparently. Not sure if it's even tropical that, but that's a curious development from the GFS. And what's left of Leslie ends up coming to the UK, which is great. Nothing else coming from Africa, and maybe a very weak system late on in the run in the Western Caribbean. But generally, the Atlantic is going to be fairly quiet over the next week or two, by the looks of things at least. Certainly not going to have a Matthew system anytime soon. Certainly not going to be Kirk. This is the ECMWF scenario. Yeah, pretty much the same, although Leslie is still out there 10 days from now, according to the ECMWF. That survives quite a long time. The FV3, this is the experimental model which hopes to replace the GFS very soon, if I don't highlight everything. So this is supposed to be better than the GFS, and also calls for that system moving through from Hispaniola. That is quite late on in the model run though, so I wouldn't put much faith into that just yet. Doesn't affect any US land areas anyway. Leslie survives quite a while, ends up just being swept away in the end and going towards the UK again. A Cape Verde type system, that's a very long range. I wouldn't put any faith into that at this time. The NavGem model. There's Leslie. Over the next 5-6 days, Leslie not doing very much, but lingering. It's getting this sort of Nadine feel about it, isn't it? Kirk not surviving very long. A weak system forming near the Cape Verde Islands next week probably won't become a tropical depression. That hurricane in the eastern Pacific. So that just pretty much summarizes the Atlantic. So let's concentrate now on the eastern Pacific. First with the GFS. Okay, run's not available. The 6 Zulu run. The 12 Zulu must just be coming out now. The 6 Zulu run showing Rosa first of all, moving through towards the north. There you go, affecting the northern part of the Baja California Peninsula, moving into Arizona, just about holding on to tropical cyclone status pretty much until the moment it hits land, and then it will be gone. And then over inland, and this next hurricane behind it could be a big one as well, but not likely. At least I don't think is like, okay, it turns back. That's long range, so that is a potential scenario. So that could be a double feature this year for the Baja California Peninsula eventually. We'll see whether that happens. That is long range. I think we should focus on the first one, Rosa. Now, I don't think there's any point showing all the other... Well, let's just get the ECMWF's take on the next system as well after Rosa. There it is moving through, and it just about continues on west. Interesting. Alright, let's go to the Central Pacific. I really want to show this. I don't know what they're saying right now, but they've been saying all sorts of things recently about this Central Pacific storm. So there it is forming from the GFS, becoming very intense into the 930s according to that, although I don't think it's quite as strong. We know what the GFS does with pressures, and then stalling for a while, and then continuing off towards the northeast, giving the Hawaiian Islands another run for its money, but maybe not quite. Let's check the ECMWF on that one as well. There it is again. Pretty similar in track. The NavGem, give you another idea there. A little bit closer to Hawaii. Almost bringing, in fact, maybe bringing tropical storm force winds to the westernmost island late on in that run. So that's something that may spark some watches, or maybe warnings. That's the East Pacific, Central Pacific. Now the Western Pacific, because there are more storms on the way here as well. The GFS again, showing this system, showing Trami. That's the 12Z run, which isn't out yet, so we'll go back to the 6 for now. There it is, moving through the islands and then striking Japan. And then that next system behind it, 30W, becoming a storm probably just as strong as Trami, striking the Japanese Ryukyu Islands, western Kyushu, and skirting by the Korean Peninsula off towards the northeast. Man. Although nothing behind that in the Western Pacific according to that latest model run. Let's just also check quickly the Southern Hemisphere, the Indian Ocean in particular. I'm curious about what the GFS says. There it is, that system in the Indian Ocean, 92S. That doesn't look like it's going to form. And then a significant cyclone in the Arabian Sea. It's sort of the time of year for that. That's very curious to see whether that does happen. That is quite late on in the run though. So we're not looking... That's going to be about a week from now before we see any rumblings of that happening. But we'll see how that goes. I think that concludes everything. Well, just a quick one, just for the South Pacific, to see whether there's any life left in Liua. No. The answer is no. If you've got any comments or questions for us, do send me a message. And that was a look at the models. So to reiterate, what we've got around the world right now is quite a few things. Typhoon Trami, Hurricane Rosa, that area of interest there that could form in the Central Pacific. The one behind Rosa, the one behind Trami, 30W. The remnants, almost the remnants, still a TD, remnants of Liua. The Mediterranean cyclone, a subtropical storm in the Mediterranean Sea. Where have you been? Yes, that's happening. And, of course, the Atlantic, Kirk and Leslie. I'm now joined by David. Good morning to you over there on the east coast of Australia. And what's the news down there? Have we got him? Hold on a minute, I'm struggling with the audio. There must be a switch that needs to be flipped. Let's start again.
You got me?
Go ahead.
Hello. How are you?
We're alright.
Good to be here. Good to be here. Although I'm about 3.5 hours earlier, but considering my previous job, my body only has 3 hours sleep. Unfortunately, the wife's she can't sleep. But what does one say about the massive amount of activity on the radar? And Nathan, I posted a bit of information whilst you've been going through the
going on with myself
models. You've done pretty good, and hi to those viewers that are currently with us. It's about 1:37 thick up there in the Marianas, so they have a tropical storm force warning in place.
A tropical storm warning, is that?
Yeah, tropical storm warning or tropical storm watch was issued around 1800 hours or 1700 hours.
Someone has just asked, is it the end of the world? You know, there have been a lot more catastrophic scenarios than we've had in recent years. I point you to, I mean, it depends which part of the world you want to talk about, but, you know, people are very quick to go nuts, basically, when we have particular scenarios playing out. And, you know, it happened in America with the 2017 storms, and again with Florence this year, but that came off the back of the longest major hurricane drought in the US since 1775.
And we can consider Cyclone Wanda over here on the Coral Sea. Back in 1974, that was one of our major systems that completely flooded out, historic flooding of Brisbane, the capital of Queensland. And we've had Cyclone Yasi up there that impacted tropical North Queensland case, the city of Cairns. And then we've had ex-tropical cyclone Oswald that formed northwest Gulf of Carpentaria, developed into a cyclone, weakened into a deep rain depression low, southeast corner of the Gulf, and tracked down inland and went back out into the southern Coral Sea region around the
David,
Queensland, New South. Go.
I want to talk about Hurricane Rosa just now as we look at
Hurricane Rosa, yeah.
Tropical storm wind speed probabilities. Don't you think it's remarkable? San Diego, 11% chance of tropical storm force winds in the next 5 days, according to the National Hurricane Center. And a lot of other areas there getting into the 10% zone, extreme southwestern Arizona, northern part of the Baja California Peninsula. It's I can't. I mean, I'm not as well versed in this part of the world when it comes to Rosa, but I know it's happened not too long ago. But I just reminding myself now of all the systems that affected a similar area, assuming that Rosa makes it as significant cyclone. Although the way it's looking at the minute, it looks like it could be on the verge of collapse. But what do you think?
Is it that bad? Well, I did do the update on Rosa, and I was really impressed. But I'm just reading the latest technical information by the centre, and Nathan, the picture has changed. Cloud tops surrounding the distinct eye of Rosa have warmed considerably over the past few hours. A recent, I think, what's the word? ASCAT pass showed a distinct double eye wall feature, and this is likely the reason for the denigration of Rosa's appearance. Now, the Vorak intensity has decreased as a result, and the initial intensity, as mentioned, has decreased to 120 knots. However, the continuing warming of cloud tops since 12 UTC, it is possible that Rosa has weakened a little more than this. So, because of the double eye wall feature, it has weakened a bit. However, since the eye wall replacement cycle is ongoing, Rosa is no longer expected to intensify. In the short term, some additional weakening is likely, typical of major hurricanes undergoing eye wall replacements. If this process completes within the next 24 hours, while the shear is low, I'm not sure what the wind shear was.
It's still quite low.
Okay. The hurricane remaining over warm sea surface temperatures. However, steady weakening is anticipated during Saturday night, since the cyclone is forecast to cross over much cooler sea surface temperatures. And Nathan, I did put a message or comment in our chat early last night that if one was to have a look at the sea surface temperatures anomaly, there is a cool pocket of water which is going to act as a barrier on or for Rosa, but I'm not sure what speed it was doing. I think it's slowed, and we'll come back to that. Rosa will likely approach the northern west coast of the Baja California Peninsula.
David, I'd like to bring us back to historical precedents. The last storm that could have taken a track like this, Hurricane Nora in 1997. This was the JTWC track for it, the US Navy, and that was what was expected of it. And this one could come even closer. It's remarkable to see that no storms have really come in at the angle that Rosa is going to come in at, which suggests to me one of two things. Either storms that have come towards that area have had so much trouble they died before they got there, which I think is the most likely scenario. I think Rosa could die before it gets there, but they're going with it at the minute. And trying to get back to my pages, but there's some other storms from a very long time ago that struck at similar angles, but they are in the distant past. Jen Kath in 1963. Hyacinth in 1972. Much further north, that one. Who knows whether it was tropical or not? Probably was, because they did have the good satellites by then, but very rare examples of storms that have taken a similar track to Rosa. Norman of 1978 being another one that went even further north. That went towards Los Angeles, and Rosa's not going to do that. There is a question. Could Rosa cause heavy rain in California? Yeah, I suppose it could. I wonder if I could take a look now at some of the model runs. The HWRF rain forecast for Rosa would be quite helpful at this time. To see if we can see how much rain they're predicting for various different areas that we can look at. So let's bring it on the screen here. Here it is. So the northern part of the Baja California Peninsula, around 8 inches, I would say. Extending into parts of California, 4 to 8 inches there. For the urban areas, though, towards the west, looking at that, rainfall amounts expected to be very low. Only about maybe an inch maximum along the coast. But places inland in Arizona, 4 inches. Even into Utah, 4 inches quite possible. And in southern Nevada. David?
I was just going to ask, what was the system that went up on the inside of the peninsula, as I think it was a hurricane, but the rainfall factor can't be ignored, especially for the Arizona region. I will be keeping a close eye on.
Well, you know it's going to be bad because they've already released a hydrologic outlook for southern Arizona and southeastern California, and I'm just going to try and read what it says if I can get to it.
Yes, I'll be interested to hear that information.
Yeah, this is what it says. So there was a question or two about the risk of flash flooding in Arizona. So, heavy rain possible Sunday night through Tuesday. Heavy rain, widespread amounts of 1 to 2 inches with localized amounts up to 4 inches possible. Pretty much what the HWRF said. Localized flooding causing some roads to be impassable. Waterways may exit their banks and impact nearby structures. And that's across the US Southwest. And the rain rates could be pretty high as well. So it says localized flooding with the potential for more widespread flooding, which is sort of two messages in one there.
I think, subject to the intensity of Rosa, once it reaches the coast, whilst the wind factor can't be ignored, and as we just mentioned, the flooding and the rainfall total. So for those in the Arizona region, I would be preparing, stocking up on food, because I don't think it takes much for that area to flood. And
certainly it's got a history.
Yes, and I know that there are a couple of storm chasers over there and in the Arizona, but I think one will have to give serious thought to whether they travel. Try and get, if you're going to travel, depart now, because I'm not sure what the road networks are like over there, but it won't take much for those roads to be
well, the
flooded.
very dry parts of the country. The fact that they've already
Yes.
got the outlooks out already, even though the storm is about 4 days away. Although it could be bringing in, I don't know when the onset of the storm's moisture will start to appear. That will probably be before the 4-day period. They said Sunday. Sounds a bit early to me. I would have thought maybe Monday, but hey, today's Sunday. So, but it will certainly continue into the middle of next week.
Nathan, I'm just having a look at the various advisories that the National Weather Service has in place. Quite a few flood advisories, but I don't think that, well, at this point in time, they wouldn't be related to
No, I've just had a look myself. No,
Rosa,
nothing
but
related.
it's far too early to say what X-Rosa will do.
X-Rosa? It's still a Category 4, David.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking about the massive flooding up there in North Carolina, South Carolina.
Well, it's not going to be on that scale.
Yeah, I realise that, but I'm just thinking of the saturation of the ground, and I know it's far too early to say what Rosa will do, but I'm just thinking about the rain factor. But Nathan, you also mentioned about that system near Hawaii.
Before you get onto that, I just want to remind
Yep.
people of what the track for Rosa looks like again. This is what the NHC are showing, and calling for a tropical storm landfall in the northern part of the Baja California Peninsula, and then towards Arizona, still as a tropical storm on Tuesday morning. And that cone is there for a reason. The NHC aren't ruling out a tiny bit of California there for a potential landfall. You never know, but I would suggest if it went that far north, it would not be tropical by the time it got there. But we'll wait and see. We're here with bated breath. But it really depends on how Rosa's going to do in the next 24 hours, how well it holds onto its structure whilst it's at a good intensity.
Nathan, what speed was it doing?
In forward motion,
yes,
it's going at 7 miles per hour.
You can see it's going to hit that cool pocket of.
You look on the left-hand side, those infrared loops as
water.
well. It's just there is an eye wall replacement cycle occurring. Let's get to the infrared imagery again to see if we can see this here. And I'm pretty sure most people would agree as they see these images come in slowly. Looks to me like an eye wall replacement cycle brought on by, I guess it's slow movement, I don't know. And all of the upwelling that it's been doing, and I would be concerned for the storm right now. I don't think sea surface temperatures are that warm. I don't actually know the actual temperature in this particular area. I'll go and see if I can get it for you in just a moment.
So at this point in time, Rosa is Category 4, but today it's expected to weaken. Some fluctuations in intensity possible on Saturday, but as mentioned earlier, a steady weakening trend is anticipated to begin by Saturday night, and hurricane force winds extend outward up to 40 miles or 65 kilometres from the centre. Tropical storm force winds extend outward up to 115 miles. And Nathan, something that did catch my eye before I came on, when I did the update last night, the central pressure was 940. It's now increased to 942 millibars.
All right, let's just I just want to bring this up on the screen now. Okay, that didn't work very well. there's a look at the sea surface temperatures. So you can see the storm's current position there. Sea surface temperatures, according to this graphic, around 28 to 29 degrees at the minute. But with the slow movement that the storm's been exhibiting, upwelling will be happening pretty quickly, and those sea surface temperatures will be going down. And as it goes further towards the north, they're cooling as well. So I do wonder what the fate of this storm is going to be short term. If it's doing this eye wall replacement cycle, and sea surface temperatures may have also suffered because it's been moving so slowly, it may really struggle to keep itself together in the next few days, which I'm pretty curious about.
Nathan, on that chart that you've got on the screen, any chance you can have a look at wind shear on it?
I think so. Is it there anywhere?
Just up the top there, and it should be where are we? It's the second bottom line.
Yeah, I see it.
And just above models.
There's the wind shear graphic right now. Still pretty low. That is in the storm's favour.
Ooh.
For a while.
It's, what, 5 to 10?
Yeah, 5 to 10.
And
yeah, so there it is. Oh, we're just about to reach the end of our hour, actually. Let's just take some questions before we finish up. How's Kirk doing? Dissipated? No, not really. But it's pretty much going.
I'll just have a look at Kirk weakening over the eastern Caribbean Sea, associated weather still affecting the Windward Islands.
Yes.
That is the headline.
That's what the NHC had. But David, I don't know if you want to say anything else as we finish our coverage here for now.
Look, when we come back, the Meteorological Service at Lucia has discontinued a tropical storm warning for Lucia. And at 2 p.m. Friday afternoon, tropical cyclone Liua, Category 1 cyclone, was located east of
They're still calling it a Category 1, are they?
Yes,
wow.
This is the Bureau of Meteorology. This is their tropical cyclone 3-day outlook. However, just quickly,
it's going to go.
I think I've got, what, about 3 minutes, 2 minutes?
About one, actually.
Right. The system is likely to weaken below tropical cyclone intensity before entering the eastern region. However, there is a low chance that it will maintain tropical cyclone intensity into the eastern region early on Saturday morning, but should weaken there soon thereafter. So she's going to possibly track over into the Australian Bureau of Meteorology's area of responsibility, taking over from Fiji.
Sir. A quick question there. Do you think Leslie will reform? Yes, it's about to happen. You may argue it's already happened. There's already a subtropical storm in the Mediterranean Sea, and we're watching that one as well at this time, as well as Rosa. There's so much going on, that's why we're doing 24/7 streaming for the time being, at least for today. We'll see how it goes. There'll be more updates coming later in the evening. Check the left-hand panel and the bottom of your screen for updates in the meantime. And of course, on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook and Twitter pages, which I'm sure David will be commandeering later on today. That's all from us for now. Sorry to cut you off there, David. I'm sure we'll hear from you again later on. And that concludes our coverage for now. We'll be back with you later. This stream's going to stay running for now so that you can communicate with others in the chat feature and probably some of us from the team as well. Until then, stay safe out there.